pleasure to be in Connecticut on this nice, cold evening. I'm glad that David Ward warned me to find the heaviest coat I had, which I wore. Being a very upset person, I always change to winter underwear on the first day of November and on the first day of March. So I'm glad that he informed me that what are the heaviest coat I have. Otherwise, I would not be very comfortable. But it's good to be here. Now, I'm going to speak of the Vicksburg campaign. Now, I always like to say this, and I have to be careful when I'm in the South. I like to say the Grant's Vicksburg campaign, due to complexity, daring, numbers engaged, and final result, makes Thomas Jonathan Jackson's Valley campaign, paraphrasing Vince Lombardi, something like the Little Sisters from the Poor. Only one Connecticut regiment is involved in the Vicksburg campaign, and since it begins on May 16, 1862. The Grant does not get intimately involved in it until the end of 1862. And the good people of Connecticut, about 7 years ago, raised enough money to put a monument up to the only Connecticut regiment that participates in the Vicksburg campaign. And that is the Irish Regiment, the 9th Connecticut. They're here, of course, during the during the period July to August 1862. Part of it is one of the preliminary efforts to take Vicksburg. So if you look at your map, you've got the numbers at the bottom of the map, on the map. And we're going to start with map number 1. Now, we're going to find the big problem that the Union are facing. Now, the Union has not had a good Christmas season of 1862. Sherman had come down to Vicksburg early and arrives at Vicksburg on the 29th day of December. And Sherman, when he was at West Point, was very cognizant and read many books because the library records for, can you hear me good? Yes. Yes. The library records for West Point still exist. Sherman read books on Alexander the Great, Caesar, Napoleon, Frederick the Great. Now, all you people could be a good Civil War soldier if you were like General Grant. He checked out romance novels. That means some of the ladies might be as good a general as General Grant. Sherman shows his knowledge of military history. When he arrives in Vicksburg on the 29th day of December, actually arrives on the 26th, attacks on the 29th, and is going to be repulsed rather disastrously for Sherman. Instead of saying, paraphrasing Caesar, I came, I saw, I conquered, he paraphrases Caesar and writes, I arrived at Vicksburg at the time appointed, landed, and failed. So we have a second failure in front of Vicksburg. The Navy, assisted by a small force of infantry commanded by General Williams, had failed in the summer of '62. Sherman fails in the winter of 1860 to '63. Meanwhile, the Yankees had taken a hell of a trouncing on December 13, 1862, at Fredericksburg, when the Confederates lose roughly 5,000 men and Burnside loses over 13,000 men. And the Battle of Stones River, it would be percentage. It is the bloodiest battle percentage-wise in the Civil War. In the Battle of Stones River, Rosecrans ekes out a victory, but loses as many men in battle as Sherman, as did Burnside at Stones River. Bragg lost 12,000 men at Stones River. So that was a standoff. Now Grant is going to have his job. His job is to capture Vicksburg and, if successful, split the South along the line of the Mississippi River and open the Mississippi River to navigation without impediment by the Confederates from St. Louis, Missouri, and carry Illinois to New Orleans. And that will be one of Grant's missions. Now, Mr. Lincoln, the President of the United States, in discussing the area, he had visited Vicksburg twice before anybody would have ever heard of it. Once in 1830, and once in 1831. And he'd been impressed by the site of Vicksburg on that bend in the Mississippi River, that horseshoe bend, and he could see that, he thought, and would say, Vicksburg is the key. General Halleck, the General-in-Chief in the Army, said that Vicksburg was worth 40 Richmonds. So Grant's job is going to be to capture Vicksburg and restore the length of the Mississippi River from Memphis, Tennessee, to Baton Rouge to control the Union. He's going to have a force of about 45,000 men. Unfortunately, no Connecticut regiments with him. And that men had not only raised in Connecticut, but no Connecticut regiments. He is supported by the Union ironclad flotilla, commanded by David Dixon Porter. Known as some Connecticut people in those, but none of any command performance. And General Pemberton has a high ground. He is apostate Pennsylvania. Born in Pennsylvania, born in the Quaker faith. He turns his back on his faith as a Quaker when he takes an appointment to West Point. Turns his back on his state of birth when he casts the lot with the South, having married a Virginia belle named Patty Thompson, who I guess would be the commanding officer in General Pemberton's headquarters. From Charleston, because he made a bad mistake, Commander Charleston, when he advocated giving up Charleston. And of course, Davis finds out the South Carolinians want him out, so he sends Pemberton to command the Department of Mississippi and East Louisiana. His mission principally to capture Vicksburg. And Beauregard will be sent to Charleston to defend Charleston. And needless to say, Patty Thompson, who is a Southern belle, finds that Jackson, Mississippi is a poor facsimile, social and otherwise, of Charleston. So needless to say, she's not happy with his promotion. So Grant's mission is going to be, how do I get my men on the Vicksburg Bluffs? As you look at the general map of the area, there are a series of bluffs that bound the east side of the Mississippi River, beginning at Cairo, just south of Cairo, Illinois, continuing along the east side of the Mississippi, rising 200 to 300 feet above the river. It will continue south all the way to Memphis. As you look at Memphis on the map, the Yazoo River, the Mississippi then bows to the west, and then you can see a series of waterways, the Yazoo River, which joins Vicksburg joins the Mississippi at Vicksburg, and its confluents are located up around in North Mississippi, and that's a way, will be a back door to Vicksburg. So Grant initially decides he does not want to attack the Vicksburg Bluffs. He already knows what happened to his alter ego Sherman at the Battle of Chickasaw Bayou on the 29th day of December. So Sherman is going to think, Grant is going to decide, if you familiarize yourself with the Mississippi River, I am going to try to reach the bluffs by losing the waterway. And turn to map number 2. On map number 2, you can see the Mississippi River. You can see the Delta of the Mississippi. The Delta of Mississippi is one, except for the natural levees along the river, is one great swamp. So the different ways to reach the Yazoo River and reach Vicksburg from the north, and that is to send the gunboats up the river under Watson Smith, support them with a division of infantry. They'll blow the levee just below Helena, Arkansas. The levee is fairly new there. And the water pours through the breach in the levee there, and the Union will take about 20 days to clear out a pass through Yazoo Pass to the Coldwater River, down the Coldwater River to the Tallahatchie River, and they arrive above Fort Pemberton, where the Yallabusha and the Tallahatchie join to form the Yazoo. And the Confederates have outsmarted them. And when the gunboats come down the river supported by Ross's men, they find a Confederate fort located just below the confluence of the Tallahatchie and the Yazoo, and the Yankees are checked. So that Grant has invested a lot of time and a lot of sickness in the Union Army, and his attempt to reach Vicksburg with the gunboats and men reaching the Yazoo River above where it begins up above Greenwood. Now the Confederates crow a lot because they think they have the gunboats trapped. So Sherman is going to say, and Grant are going to say, well, we'll send an expedition up Steele's Bayou. Now Steele's Bayou flows into the Big Black River, to the Yazoo River, 12 miles above the Vicksburg. We'll send our gunboats up Steele's Bayou, through Black Bayou, up Deer Creek, and we will pass through Rolling Fork, down the Big Sunflower River, and we'll come out south of Fort Pemberton, and we will have the Confederates trapped. Well, Porter does pretty well until he reaches Rolling Fork and finds the Confederates are there. They've blocked the river, and Porter is soon in a situation that he may have to do what all naval officers hate to do. You're trapped. How are you going to get them out down the way they came? And he's going to try to back them up. And he's debating blowing up his gunboats. That would not be good for the man who is the second man to become a real admiral in the United States Navy. And Sherman will make a march, and we have to go rather fast, arrive in the nick of time, and bail Porter out of his embarrassment situation. But Grant has now failed to reach the Vicksburg by the Yazoo River from the north. Meanwhile, he had tried again by digging a canal across the base of this sort of point and divert the river to bypass Vicksburg. Mother Nature is on the side of the Confederates, and this canal is a failure. Those guys from Connecticut had worked there in June and July 1862, when lots of them were being struck down by malaria and dysentery, and they had not done it. And it shows that Grant can't do it any better. But Mother Nature in 1876 will break a new channel through there, and it will isolate Vicksburg from the river. The final time he tries to get by Vicksburg is throwing the levee up at Lake Providence. That's going to be a 200-mile detour, 7 gunboats through Lake Providence, down the bayous, and finally reaching Red River, and that failed. So we're now at the end of, with the 29th day of March, and Grant is frustrated. He's been checked, held at bay in the Confederates through 3 months. He's lost about 10,000 men without killing very many Confederates. They're dying of dysentery, malaria, and such. So he's reached a turning point in his career. Now, he goes and says, I now have 3 options on the 29th of March. One is to go all the way back to Memphis and start overland down the railroads of interior Mississippi. But that's a step backward 200 miles. And one of his corps commanders is very ambitious. That is John A. McClellan. He is a political general. He knows President Lincoln well because he lived in the same block in Springfield that the Lincolns used. He's been a lawyer, he knows him well, and he is of the opinion these West Pointers don't really know how to do war. And his friends are urging, and Grant is concerned, that if I go back to Memphis, he will be the boy wonder that will be given the job of capturing Vicksburg. There's another way we can go. We can attack the bluffs. That would be worse than what that brilliant Burnside did at Fredericksburg. He would lose more men than Burnside did at Fredericksburg. And he can better less, and Grant smart enough to know that wouldn't advance his career. His last option is to move his army down the west bank of the river, moving it southward from his bases on the west side of the river, moving down old channels of the Mississippi, because the Mississippi is an alluvial river, and it's wandered back and forth from the bluffs on the east side, which you can't go any further east, to a point 40 and 50 miles to the west of the river. And General Grant decides, let's go that route. Now, the only guy that supports that route is a man that wants his job, General John Andrew McClellan. Sherman and McPherson tell old Grant, they're West Pointers. And they tell him, you've got to go back to Memphis. You've got to go back to Memphis. You cannot attack the bluffs, and you cannot succeed by moving down the natural levees west of the river and crossing the Mississippi down in the area of Bruinsburg. So that means that Grant has to give General McClellan the task of doing it, because at least his heart is in it. And because both McPherson and Sherman had said, no, don't do that. So Grant, on the 31st, having made his decision, starts his men moving southward. All right, now if you So you're going to, as you look on the river, you're going to see that by the 16th day of April, the Union column moving down the west bank of the river has reached the area near Fisherman's, near Hard Times Landing. And you'll then tell Porter, get your gunboats and run them by Vicksburg. Porter says, now remember, I take it by Vicksburg, my gunboats are underpowered, and if I take them down the river, I cannot come up the river. I could probably catch the Confederates snapping and get by Vicksburg under cover of darkness. But once I'm below Vicksburg, you are wedded to crossing the river southward, come hell or high water. And on the 16th, Porter with 7 gunboats, and by 3 transports, gets the Confederates snapping, and they pass the Vicksburg batteries with the loss of 1 vessel, the Henry Clay. Since we got away with it there, let's do it again on the 22nd day of April with 6 gunboats. 6 transports, no gunboats. And they pass, losing 1. The same. So now he has his fleet. The fleet is south of the city, the transports are south of the city, and McClernand's advance, being joined by McPherson, have reached Hard Times Landing. As you can see on the map, and you see that is halfway to Natchez, and on your map, and that would be where you can see that arrow. All right, now let's turn to map number 3. Map number 3. Now, Grant is ready to cross the river. Now, Pemberton is focusing on other problems. So he orders one of the few great successful cavalry raids in the war. Benjamin Gerson hates horses. Why does he hate horses? He's been kicked in the face. It's a good thing it's in the days of growing beards. He has a terrible scar. He hates horses. So what does he end up commanding cavalry? He's a Pittsburgh and music teacher, and Grant goes and works with General Hurlbut. He says, how about having Gerson do a raid with his cavalry, 1,700 men. He will leave Grand Junction and move southward. See if we can get Pemberton to take his eye off the men who are on the west side of the river. And Gerson goes on, heads southward, detaches Colonel Hatch. He'll go back where you can see his arrow going back. The Confederate cavalry in northeast Mississippi follows him back. Gerson goes on down, 24th day, reaches Newton Station, breaks the station, railroad the station, going east out of Vicksburg, and Pemberton becomes absolutely absorbed with what Gerson is doing. He has forgotten all about General Grant, who is poised on the other side of the river. Gerson will go on. He will reach Union Church, about 20 miles from Hard Times Landing, where Grant's going to embark, runs into Confederates there, and on the second day of May, he has arrived at Baton Rouge. Pemberton is concentrating all this time on Gerson as he moves south. But now Grant is ready to cross the river. Now, flip to map number 4. We are now ahead. We're now on the 28th day of April. Gerson as well is now approaching Natchez. The Confederates are focusing on Grierson. Pemberton is focusing on Grierson. He is not focusing. It's done. If you're playing billiards or pool, he's taken his eye off the ball. And on the evening, on the 29th day of April, Porter, with his 7 gunboats, seeks to bombard and force the Confederates to evacuate Grand Gulf. Porter later will say Grand Gulf is the strongest place on the river. You always make something that you get repulsed, the strongest place. There's got to be a good reason for you getting repulsed. And the Union gunboats are repulsed. By noon, by 2 o'clock, Grant goes to meet with Sherman and with Porter, says, I don't want to land my men at Grand Gulf. You have not silenced the batteries. So he says, tonight I want you to take your gunboats and run by the batteries and proceed downriver to the area just above Hard Times Landing. You're going to run the batteries. You're not going to try to bombard them. I'm going to land my men, march them across the base of Coffee Point, and at the Nisharoon Plantation will rendezvous with you, will rendezvous my army with McClernand's Corps and 2 of McPherson's division with you. Sherman is still up in the Vicksburg area, keeping Pemberton focusing on Vicksburg. So Grant, on the 30th, crosses the river. He's maneuvered just like you've got a good basketball announcer. Grant has just maneuvered Pemberton out of his jockstrap. And makes an unopposed landing at Hard Times. The Confederate cavalry pursuing Grierson, the Confederates along the railroad looking eastward, and Grant's across the river. And on the 1st, it's going to be just like Omaha Beach. And he's going to have the same success. He lands at Hard Times Landing, engages the Confederates at 4 miles west of Fort Gibson. And Grant has Pemberton being outmaneuvered, as I say. He has 8,000 men to oppose Grant's advance. Now, Grant's key thing is to seize his bridgehead. So with McClernand in advance, supported by McPherson, they fight the Battle of Fort Gibson. Well, of course, even the Confederates have to admit, Grant has 24,000 men, and the Confederates have 8,000, and the battle can only go one way. General Grant is on the high ground. He's the same way that Ike and Bradley felt on the evening of June 6th, when they have seized the beachhead at Omaha Beach. At noon, Bradley was ready to pull off. So they've done that. So he now has been on high ground. Now, Civil War generals in the past, before you have cell phone, before you have the internet, when Grant and the Confederates abandoned Fort Gibson on the night of the 1st and 2nd. Grant arrives at Fort Gibson on the 2nd, and he finds an order from the Secretary of War, the General of Washington, saying, we want you to entrench your people at Fort Gibson, and you either send General McClernand with his corps southward to Natchez to help General Butler, to help General, to help the Union force commanded by General Banks. You people who are all involved in the East know General Banks well. He had learned to be a general by Speaker of the House. The same as Nancy Pelosi. Experience gained as Speaker of the House. Or, to show you I'm not partisan, Newt Gingrich. The experience of being Speaker of the House. And the orders are, you either go yourself with McClernand's Corps down and join General Banks and capture Port Hudson. Leave your men entrenched here. And Grant will say, I've got the initiative. So he knows there's no internet. He knows there's no cell phone. So he writes a message, gives it to a man that's going to have to go by boat all the way to Cairo, Illinois, and then telegraph to Washington, D.C., that what he's going to do, he's got the initiative, he's across the river, he's on the high ground, and he thinks it would be a big mistake if he went entrenched his position at Grand Gulf and sent either going himself to McClernand or sending a person down there. Therefore, I'm going to keep the initiative. So you see, there's a break that Grant has that a modern general can't have. Poor General Schwarzkopf, imagine 2 days out of Baghdad. Think of Bush #1, what he does when Schwarzkopf is 2 days out of Baghdad. He halts it. And poor Bush, Senator Bush, has a cancer to address when he becomes president 8 years later. We're going to find out how much better off, if you've got a good general, he is, and there's no cell phone and no internet. So he sends a message to Sherman, get your tail down here, follow that route that McClernand and McPherson have passed, cross the Big Black, because the Confederates had to abandon Grand Gulf, and join us there as fast as you can. So Grant is now ready to strike inland. He seized his bridgehead with the victory at Grand Gulf. He concentrates his men in the area of Rocky Springs, where Sherman will arrive, coming by a fast march southward from Milliken's Bend. That gives Grant a field force of about 45,000 men, far smaller in numbers than the Army of the Potomac. Pemberton has about 30,000 men, maybe 35,000 men. Grant has the initiative. Now Grant moves up he's occupied Grand Gulf, and he's going to concentrate his army near Rocky Springs. Now he's got two options. He can go north of Vicksburg. That's what the Confederate thinks he's going to do. If he does that, he might capture Vicksburg, but he will not capture the enemy army. He decides he's going to strike inland, siege Jackson, Mississippi, cut the communications with Vicksburg with the rest of the Confederacy, and then go after Vicksburg. If he can do this, he not only will capture Vicksburg, but he will end up destroying General Pemberton's army. So he moves inland. And the next big battle is going to be on the 12th. Everything is going Grant's way on the 12th. The Confederates have rushed General Gregg up to Jackson with about 4,000 men. McPherson is going to be approaching Raymond on the 12th with 12,000 men. Grant is with McPherson and McClernand about 14 miles west of Raymond. Now McPherson, I'm not a great McPherson fan. Now the ladies like him, and he's good looking, and he turns down a lead. When the Atlanta campaign is leave, Sherman talks him into staying with him. But McPherson wants to get a leave to marry the lovely Emma Hoffman. That makes a wonderful romantic story, because he doesn't take his leave. And what happens to Mack in the Atlanta campaign? He'll never marry Emma Hoffman, and Emma will be a bereaved woman who never marries her dream man till she finally goes to the grave. So that's, so they went to battle of Raymond. Now the Confederates are rushing reinforcements from Charleston, from Savannah, and from Port Hudson, all into Jackson. So Grant decides, I'm going to Jackson. If I can capture Jackson, presumably, notice, you're a Joe Johnson fan, you notice I used presumably the second ablest Confederate general has been ordered by President Davis to proceed from Oklahoma, Tennessee to Jackson and take charge of the operations in Mississippi. Now, Pemberton is much closer to Davis than is Johnson. Johnson and Davis have a very acerbic relationship, just about the same as the relationship between Lincoln and McClellan will become. And Grant will move, and McPherson and Jackson will McPherson and Sherman will converge on Jackson on the 14th. They capture Jackson and scatter Johnston's army to the winds. Johnston had arrived in Jackson on the evening of the 13th. Instead of really planning what he's going to do, he'll inform the Secretary of War, I am too late. And he evacuated Jackson on the 14th, and the army is concentrating disappears. Some go northward toward Canton, some of them go back east toward Morton, and others go south toward Macomb. So the big battle, the decisive battle of the campaign, will take place at Championsville on the 16th, Saturday. There's going to be, Pemberton will have roughly 24,000 men, Grant will have 32,000 men, and the battle will ebb and flow through a long day. At the end of the long day, Pemberton's army is defeated. They're going to lose 29 cannon, they're going to lose 4,200 men, they're going to have one division cut off, and Grant has won the decisive field engagement. Pemberton's army falls back to the Big Black River when they take up a position, and there on the 17th, the Confederates' morale dropping very rapidly. Now, Grant doesn't want McClellan to be the star. He wants McPherson and Sherman to be the star. He wants them to cross the Big Black first, but McClellan steals the thunder, attacks, routs the Confederates, captured 18 cannon, 1,700 men, and is across the Big Black first. Grant has a happy moment that afternoon. Arriving from Washington is an answer to that telegram that he sent on that slow boat to China from Washington, saying that I'm not doing what you ordered me to do. I have the initiative, and I'm going on and keep the initiative. And the telegram, with the message he gets, it's come all the way back from Washington, on a slow boat from China coming the wrong way, is disapproving what Grant had. I'll bet Bush Jr. wishes to hell that Bush Sr. hadn't stopped Schwarzkopf 2 days out of Baghdad in January 1991. And his son would have had a lot of big problems. And we would have had a lot of big problems and built out of that. So that shows that sometimes we're worse off with cell phones and the internet than they were. They had the internet, the Vicksburg campaign would not have happened. It does, and we don't know. So Grant is now going to close in on Vicksburg. Now, look your map to time. I have to watch my time very fast on this one. All right. The Grant on the 18th, he is across the river, the Big Rock River. You want to find out the relation to it is 14 miles east of Vicksburg with all three of his corps. Sherman will approach Vicksburg from the northeast on the Graveyard Road, called the Graveyard Road because it passes the city cemetery. And McPherson will approach on the Jackson Road, see where it is on the map, and McClernand will approach on the back Baldwin's Ferry Road. Grant is feeling good. He meets Sherman on the morning of the 19th, and Sherman has his confessions. He said, I was against what you did. I thought you should have gone back to Memphis, and you did what I thought was wrong. You put your army where I believe the enemy would have maneuvered for several months to get you into that position. And now you are back in Vicksburg. And the soldiers are excited because they've lived pretty well. They've been carrying their hard rations in wagons. They've been confiscating a lot of fresh beef and raw-pressed hog from the various Confederates along the way. But they are getting tired of this meat diet, and when they see the Union gunboats on the Mississippi above, on the Yazoo River, upstream, they start shouting, hardtack, hardtack, hardtack. So the soldiers realize the campaign is almost over. The soldiers are confident after the battles they fought to the west, to the east and south of the city, in which they've captured 5 Confederate guns at Fort Gibson. They've captured 1 Confederate gun at Raymond. They've captured 18 Confederate cannons at Jackson. They've captured 29 Confederate cannons at Champion Hill, 18 Confederate cannons at Big Black River. So the Confederates in these combined battles had lost, which the defending force doesn't like to do. They had lost a total of these 4 or 5 battles that I've been talking about. The Confederates have suffered almost 9,000 casualties. The Union, about 3,000 casualties. But the Confederates are back in their defenses. Pemberton is really down in the dumps on the afternoon of the 17th. He'll say to Colonel Lockett, just 30 years ago today, I arrived at West Point with my appointment, with my career in front of me, and now everything is collapsed. Lockett says, be a good cheer. In Vicksburg, we have about 10,000 men that have not been out campaigning with us. We have 107 cannon, and we have a belt of fortifications. So Lockett will make himself look good when he's 29 years old, and he hastens in, and then the Vicksburg citizens, Vicksburg had a population of about 4,500. They've had a number of refugee out, another refugee in. And the Confederate Army was filed into the earthworks. They have about 32,000 men. Grant has about 36,000 men. So Grant believes, I'm going to attack them right now. We routed them at the Big Black. We beat the daylights out of the Big Black at Champion Hill. Let's get it over today. His men are more even eager to end it. It's like in August 1944, when after the breakout of the beachheads, everybody was singing United States, the boys will be back by Thanksgiving. And as soon as they crossed the border into the fatherland, they learned there's a hell of a lot of fight in the Germans yet. They've got the Hurtgen balls, and the balls got ahead of them. So they ain't going to be home before days after the 8th day of May. 1945. So they're in the same feeling the soldiers are that they were till they found out. Now the problem is tanks have to run on gas, and they run on gas, and they give the gas. Eisenhower makes a bad decision and gives it to Montgomery on the bridge too far, which ends into a disaster and gives the Germans a lot of time. And Grant's initial attack on Vicksburg, Grant should have studied that with no preparation. It's going very fast. Grant's lost 990 men, the Confederates 108. The Confederates are beginning to recover himself. So Grant plans an all-out attack for the 22nd. The gunboats will stand up the river and bombard the city. Sherman will attack from the northeast down the Graveyard Road. McPherson will attack on the Jackson Road. McClernand will attack on the Baldwin's Ferry Road and River. This is no fun and game. It's going to be a predecessor to what Grant is going to experience at Cold Harbor. The Confederates now under defenses are going to send 3,100 Yankees on to either prison camps or to the great reward in the big battlefield in the sky. So everywhere they are, the Union are repulsed. Grant now decides, I guess I'm going to have to put up with a siege. He worries about a siege because the sickly season is approaching, in which malaria and yellow fever will spread. So he decides to lay siege to Vicksburg. And he will call in reinforcements. The Union government will send him roughly 30,000 reinforcements. And they will be deployed to the east of Vicksburg along the Big Black to hold Johnston at bay. Now, for about a week, Johnston from the east and Pemberton in Vicksburg have more men in Vicksburg than Grant has outside. But with the revival of 30,000 reinforcements, Sherman will take his troops and roll them around the Big Black, and they will lay siege to Vicksburg. I'll turn to the map, the next map, and they form an iron ring around it. The Confederate defenses are 9 miles in extent. The Confederate left rests on Fort Hill and swings following the ridge lines, very strong position, and the Confederate right anchors on Southport, south of the city. So Grant is going to lay siege to them, and they're going to do this a slow way. The Pemberton does not prepare it very well. He does not introduce rations to the civilians. The civilians are in worse shape as they cut off supplies. After the 18th day of June, there's no communication between Johnston and Pemberton. Each with Johnston trying to cover his ass because he's made no real effort to relieve Vicksburg. And as the siege gets tighter and tighter, the Federals will drive 13 approach trenches to move the troops into when they can assault. They bombard, resort to psychological warfare, making fake letters addressed to many soldiers, which they drop them with kites over Vicksburg, indicating that the Confederates' morale is breaking, and if Pemberton doesn't surrender the men, can't feed them, he better surrender the men. So on the 2nd day of July, Pemberton holds a meeting, attended by his 4 division commanders. During the siege, the Union, because of superior firepower on the Union side, during the siege, the Confederate losses will exceed the Union losses. And the number of Confederates fit for duty has sunk during the siege, which begins on the 25th, from roughly 32,000 men to 18,000 effectives. Now, as they meet in Pemberton's headquarters, Pemberton says, I know my people. I know if we can open negotiations looking toward a surrender on the 4th of July, I know the vanity of my people. Saying he's a northerner, and we will probably get much better terms if we surrender now than let them have this victory on the 4th day of July. Well, they vote, and then two of the division commanders say, let's try to break out. The other two division commanders says no, and on the 3rd, General Bowen will go through the lines, passing out the Baldwin's Ferry Road with Captain Colonel Montgomery, the flag of truce, and coming out the Baldwin's Ferry Road, which appears on the map near the railroad, he meets A.J. Whiskey Smith, the Union Division Commander, and he says, I have a message from General Pemberton, and he would like to set up a meeting with General Grant for a discussion of possible terms for the surrender of Vicksburg. And Grant will say, all right, we will meet at 3:30 in the afternoon on your map, near the Jackson Road, near the Great Redoubt and the Louisiana Redan, and I will meet with you and we'll talk about terms for possible surrender of Vicksburg. Well, Pemberton comes out, he brings Bowen with him. Bowen is, it's going to turn out, as maybe indicated that Grant was more generous than Grant is ready to be. Accompanied by Montgomery, with Grant, and the person, Sherman isn't there because he's with the troops over on the Big Black River, looking for General Johnson in case he tries to do anything. And they reminisce a little bit about the Mexican War. And it's not going to be a very friendly meeting. And Pemberton and Grant will finally say, my terms are unconditional and immediate surrender. The same ones that he inflicted on the Confederates at Fort Donelson. And which it became unconditional surrender to Grant. So he demands unconditional surrender. And then it ends Pemberton then becomes very unhappy about that. He thinks that Grant would probably do better terms. And he's going to say, well, if it's that way, you'll bury more men before I'll surrender Vicksburg. They finally talked Grant into maybe McPherson and Logan and Ord, who succeeded McClernand as commander of the 13th Corps. Why don't you go back and think it over, General Grant, your headquarters? And they say, all right, we will suspend operations, the truce is in effect, until Grant can reply. Now, Grant has a drinking problem. Now, his keeper is General Rollins. Rollins' father had died in alcohol. So, General Rollins knows Grant's problems. And he knows that Grant gets bored easily if there's not active operations, which is having a siege operation. And those times, whether it's at Petersburg or Vicksburg, he makes arrangements for Mrs. Grant with the second and third child. The oldest child, Fred, is with Grant during the siege. Grant, as a colonel, being the babysitter for Fred Grant. Fred Grant is with him all during this campaign I'm talking about. Mrs. Grant has come down to make sure that Grant doesn't go on another binge like he did at the end of the second week in July. And as Grant thinks it over, well, I had a lot of problems handling 13,000 Confederate prisoners. How much problem I'm going to have handling 29,000 Confederate prisoners? And he decides that he's going to propose the Confederate Army will surrender. but Grant is going to give them terms. They will surrender the public property. They will be allowed to keep their private property, which is going to be a problem because the officers look at their slaves as private property, not public property. And you will sign paroles not to fight again and to duly exchange, and provide your rations, and you can march out. Now, Pepper's men have broken the Union Code, and he knows that Grant has backed off from unconditional surrender. And he meets with his 18 senior officers, division commanders, brigade commanders, and they vote 16-2 to accept it. So, Grant sends his message through officially. Pemberton replies that we accept it, and we'll march out at 10 o'clock in the morning on the 4th day of July, stack our arms and accoutrements in front of our works, and return to work, and you can march in and take possession of the city. Now, Pemberton is not very happy about it, and when the Union march in, they're going to be marching in along two roads. McPherson's men will march into Jackson Road, which appears on your map. McPherson's men will march in via the Baldwin's Ferry Road. They'll meet at the courthouse. The band's playing. They'll march around the Warren County Courthouse. And Vicksburg has fallen. Of the Confederates, 29,495, 708 will refuse to sign a roll. That means there's a fed up with the Confederates, they'll go to a Union prison camp rather than sign a parole, risking exchange, and going back into duty. Now, Grant again knows that it's going to be bad for poor General Meade. Grant will send a telegram to Cairo, Illinois, to be forwarded to the president, announcing the fall of Vicksburg, with the surrender of 495,000 men, 172 cannon, 60,000 rounds of ammunition, 60,000 stand of arms, better arms than the Union have out west. The arms they're going to have are all going to be Enfields, and 2 million rounds of ammunition. And with the fall of Vicksburg, you'll notify General Banks down in Gardner, the opponents down at Port Hudson, and on the 9th of July, Port Hudson, 6,000 more Confederates, without getting paroled, will surrender to General Banks. Now the message from Grant will go to Cairo, Illinois, and arrive in Washington. Bad day for General Meade. He arrived in Washington at the Secretary of War's office, where Grant is, about 6 in the evening on the 7th. Meade has gotten in big trouble with the President of the United States on that day, because on the morning of the 7th day of July, Meade had issued a congratulatory order to his army. And he's going to congratulate his fellow soldiers. You have won a great victory. And I call on you for further exertions to drive the invaders from our soil. And Lincoln goes berserk. And you say, my God, the guy sounds like General McClellan. It's all our soil. What does he mean? And of course, Meade is in the doghouse. It'll get worse when General Lee, on the night of the 13th and 14th, escapes across the Potomac River, losing only about 1,500 prisoners in the way. And Lincoln starts thinking of who I want for General-in-Chief, it ain't going to be General Meade. It's going to be General Grant, because you'll have the victory at Chattanooga after this to tack on to it. And so the final summing up is Lincoln will write a letter to Roscoe Conkling, a friend of his, and he will report the steamboat Imperial left Memphis, left St. Louis on the 7th day of July, arrived in New Orleans on the 19th day of July, and the Father of Waters now goes unvexed to the sea. So that is a brief summary of Grant and the Vicksburg campaign. The road that began at Fort Donelson with unconditional surrender of Grant on the morning of the 6th, Sunday, the 16th of February, 1862. The narrow escape that Grant had at Shiloh on the 6th and 7th, when both McPherson and Sherman urged him to retreat. He told both of them, they beat us today, we'll beat them tomorrow. The other one, he says, we'll sleep at our camps tomorrow, indicating that that Grant is going to win when there's a second day at Shiloh. Vicksburg, and they capture Vicksburg, the breaking of Bragg's army at Missionary Ridge. And you look at his friend, the representative representing Galena, Illinois, he will introduce legislation establishing a rank of Lieutenant General, Commander-in-Chief of the Army. Not a man has held it since George Washington. When Washington left the White House on the 4th day of March, 1797, we were in an undeclared war with France. And the last man to hold that rank of Lieutenant General, Commander General-in-Chief of the Army, would be George Washington. And of course that rank expired when Washington is laid to rest in his grave in 1799. And it's no doubt who the General-in-Chief is going to be. It's going to be U.S. Grant. And the bill will pass, and Grant will be invited to the White House, and he arrives in Washington on the 8th. He arrives early in the morning with Fred following. That's his, who is now 13 years old. He's no longer 12 years old. And they walk into the Wards Hotel. And he signs his name, and he got the register for that U.S. Grattan's son. The guy wakes up. That's General Grant. And they enter, and they kick a New York industrialist, a capitalist, out of suites 7 and 8. And so Grant moves into there. And when Grant goes to the White House that night, how different it is. He walks to the White House from the Wards Hotel, enters, knocks at the door, the president lets him, and he introduces everybody at this soiree that's on. I want you to meet the new General-in-Chief of the Army, U.S. Grant. And the next day, he's invested it at the War Department. He's given that commission. So this is Grant at his best, the Vicksburg campaign. Now, one sideline. The two greatest generals of the Civil War will meet, of course, in William McLean's Park at 3:30 in the afternoon on the 9th day of April. And Grant went far beyond what Lee, the president, authorized him to do in granting generous terms to General Lee. Went far beyond what he was authorized. So you can say that maybe that was Lee and Grant's greatest day when they met, because we did not have a situation in which Porter Alexander had urged Lee, break up your army and we'll go to the hills and the mountains and conduct a guerrilla warfare. And Lee says, well, if we do that, the Union will follow us to the mountains. Remember, the bitterness between the people in Serbia and Croatia goes back to the Battle of Kosovo, which was happened about 2 years before Columbus discovered America. The Serbs and the Croats have hated each other since then. Any questions?